Hello everyone, it's Dominic here from Esports News UK. Delighted to be joined by a very special guest today, Darren Cox, someone who's responsible for the GT Academy, from what I understand, and that's what the whole Gran Turismo movie is based on. So, a real sort of, I guess, a legend in the racing game world. Darren, thanks very much for joining me, and please tell us a bit about yourself, a bit about your current role.
That's an introduction, isn't it? So I don't know if I can live up to that in our little chat we're going to have now. But currently owner and founder of a business called DCC & Co, which is my latest venture. I've done several things over the course of my career, including, as you say, the GT Academy program. That was when I was working at Nissan, and I started at Nissan, as the film depicts quite correctly, in the collections department, collecting money from people who had car loans that they defaulted on, and ended up being the global motorsport director and head of performance cars, including Z and GTR. So quite a wide career, and then basically owned and ran a few businesses. And for your audience, would be interested, I guess, in the fact that had a program called World's Fastest Gamer we were involved in, but most importantly, I guess, from an esports side of things, also ran the Mercedes Formula One esports team, as well as the Racing Point one, which is now Aston Martin, of course. Managed a few drivers, including Brendan Lee. So Brendan and ourselves won the first and second F1 esports competition. And
That's
then
right, I remember writing about that.
Yeah, the championship as a constructor with Mercedes as well. So yeah, done a few bits in the racing game genre, and now working on various projects in Formula One, and also for some TV companies. So keeping my hand in both virtual and real racing.
It's amazing. It's our paths have crossed a little bit, because I remember my first job out of uni was working for Auto Trader back in 2007, and that was just after the GT Academy launched. I remember writing about it back then. And then, I interviewed you about World's Fastest Gamer a few years ago. I'll try and put those links in the description here. But it's just amazing, this story. I'd love to hear where the original idea first came from, and I guess how Nissan and Sony trusted you to get started with this.
The idea was a competition we ran with what was then the Haymarket group of companies, so Autocar, etc. And Sony were bringing out Gran Turismo 4 at the time, and we were bringing out a new special edition 350Z, which by strange coincidence I've got the gear stick from gear knob from on my desk, which is a bit strange. I won't tell you why I've got that on there, but that's for another day. And the competition, I mean, remember, this is 2005, so online gaming was not really a thing, and it certainly wasn't on Gran Turismo. So the competition was almost as handmade as send in via postcard your guess at Kazunori Yamaguchi, the maker of Gran Turismo and CEO of Polyphony Digital, who obviously features heavily in the film. Guess his lap time around the Nürburgring, and the 20 people that got closest were invited to Bedford Autodrome. So they weren't ranked, that they weren't the top 20 gamers in the country. They were just 20 gamers that liked Gran Turismo, basically. And we had all sorts of challenges, literally from parking a Micra to doing an off-road course in a 4x4. Could you drive, basically? And one of those elements was driving a 350Z on track, and another one was driving 350Z in the game. And one of the instructors said to me, a couple of these guys can actually pedal the cars. In other words, they're good drivers. So I looked at the times on Gran Turismo, I looked at the times from the track, the real track driving, and the guys that were at the top were the same guys. And that was the idea, basically. And it took me 3 years to come up with that idea, or to get that idea through, and we launched it. And then, you were saying about why Nissan and Sony would trust me to do it. I mean, they didn't, basically. They thought it was completely bonkers. And we had all sorts of restrictions in place. So we had a independent health and safety inspector on site for the first year, and he had the ability to stop the program if he saw any issues. We had a operations manual about this thick, explaining what we were going to do before we did it. So it was very admin and heavy and risk averse, basically. But it worked. The winner was Lucas Ordonez. In fact, we had two winners. A guy called Lars Schlommer. Schlommer didn't make it through the training program, and Lucas did, and has a fantastically successful career. Podiums at Le Mans. Is now a ambassador for Sony, Polyphony, PlayStation, and Toyota. So very, very good outcome for him. But obviously the movie's not made about him because Jan's got, I guess, a more interesting story, at least to the Hollywood movie execs who decided on what they wanted to tell the story about. So yeah, that was the really quick background of how it came about. And I've condensed many years into a few bullet points there, but obviously in the film, that whole gestation period and that pushing to get the program agreed, etc., is condensed into maybe 3 minutes. And Hollywood's got to do that, right? So I've thought maybe I should finish my book that I started writing, which would be the real story behind.
That would be amazing. Yeah, please do finish that. I'd love to read that, and I'm sure many others would as well. You mentioned it was part of a sort of a tie-up with the Haymarket group of magazines. So was that idea then, and was you doing marketing through them, or did you be inspired by their idea and improve it?
Their idea, they obviously, as you well know, publications like that want to take money off of big companies, and it was an advertising campaign to promote this new car. So there was no gamer to racer link there at all. That was subsequent to that. Theirs was just, we're going to put Sony together. We've got this marketing budget for Gran Turismo 4. We've got Nissan that's got a marketing budget for the new 350Z. Put it together. I then came up with the concept of the special edition car, which was the Gran Turismo 4. And then while we were doing that, we then ran this competition, which just gave me the inspiration for what now is known as Gamer to Racer.
Now you mentioned Hollywood, making decisions to cut things down and change things a little bit. Why did Hollywood make the decision to change your name to Danny Moore, as I understand it? What's that been like?
Yeah, there's a couple there's three reasons. I would say number one, my name, Darren Cox, I guess is not most Hollywood of names. Secondly, politics, which we can touch on. And thirdly, as everyone keeps saying in the promotion, and certainly when you watch the movie, the character's loosely based on me.
Right, okay.
And when I talk about politics, I don't work for Nissan anymore. It's a Sony invested Sony film, in terms of the production. They want their story being told. They want, Kazunori-san to be the hero. They want Jan to be the hero. They want the game to be the hero. They don't need a guy that's no longer at Nissan being the hero. So to adapt the name makes the hard link between me and the character broken, first of all, and then secondly, it's not me, right? That character is way too corporate. The character in the film makes some decisions based on him looking to progress his career, and the opposite was true. This was a massive risk for my career. I had a good career. I had a good career path within Nissan, and this was on the side. This wasn't part of my main job, and I took a massive risk to try and make it happen because I knew it was the right thing to do, and I'm passionate about gaming and racing. So that link between me and that character are completely off in terms of how that works, and a number of other things which I don't need to go into the detail of. So it's an approximation of me, but it's not me. And my summary of my film, someone that was involved in GT Academy, was, it's a great film, but it's not as good as the reality. And what they meant by that was we had an absolute blast doing this. It was a really great working culture that we established within this. It was innovative, it was edgy, it was entrepreneurial within within two big organizations, being Sony and Nissan. So yeah, that's the reason that they changed the name, and they changed some other things as well. Those people that would have seen the film will see that the awful crash that Jan had comes in the film before his podium at Le Mans. They were the other way around. There's if you're a racing geek, there's GT4 cars, racing at Le Mans. There's LMP3 cars racing at Le Mans. I mean, that's geeky like me. The last corner of Le Mans looks nothing like the last corner of Le Mans. So it's been Hollywooded, but the target audience isn't me, right? As a car geek, as you can see in my car, part of my car memorabilia behind me here. It's made for generalist cinema goers, people that love gaming, and people that love great stories. And that, at the end of it, is what the movie is a fantastic story. It would be a good film if it wasn't true. The fact that the story is based in reality makes it a great film, because people, the reason you go to the cinema is to suspend reality, right? So you watch this film, you think, wow, that story, that would, almost that would never happen. That is crazy. The fact that they took this guy from a PlayStation, turned him into a racing driver, and he had that amazing success after such a difficult moment in his life, and then you realise actually it's a true story. It notches it up, I would say, in terms of people's appreciation of the film.
Yeah, 100%. And I know, so they've changed the character. Sort of loosely based on you, but they've really changed it. But what's it like having someone like Orlando Bloom cast to play as that role?
Well, people have been saying, there's a game at dinner parties. I've never obviously been to these dinner parties. Is who would play you in a movie, right? So I don't need to play that game anymore, do I? Because someone is. But this movie's been in the works for 10 years, and there's been various conversations, and the first conversation I had was with one of the executive producers who's listed on there, a guy called Dani Brunetti, who's made films such as Social Network, Captain Phillips, 21. He made House of Cards. So big hitter in Hollywood. And the first time I met him, I'd read the initial script, which was completely different to this one, and it was absolutely not based in reality. And I challenged him on it, and his exact words were, I won't use the exact word, but this is not an effing documentary, man. And what he meant by that was, we need to make it right for Hollywood. But when they then dug into the Jan story, I mean, this was because they were introduced to the Lucas story. When they dug in and researched all the other winners, they found the Jan story, which is more compelling, I guess, to the Hollywood guys and everyone involved in the project, which is, not me, I'm on the periphery. So the second meeting I had with him, with Jan, they were talking about buying his life rights. And Jan made some requests about how his characters should be portrayed, and that was that it should be played by an actor of colour or mixed race actor, and there was some hard discussions, not around that, but around some of the other things he requested. So to lighten up the conversation at the end of the meeting, I said, and by the way, I want Jack Black to play me. Which I think would have been a much better character choice than Orlando Bloom. But when the movie was being made, I kept getting text messages saying, we're talking to such and such, and maybe you have to read the book to find out those other actors. Because I almost can't believe that they were. It would almost be even more shocking than Orlando Bloom playing me. And I'm sure some of them were just, a flat no, right? But there was, some really interesting actor names in there. And so I would say to my wife, they're talking to such and such about it. And she's like, no, that's not going to happen. After 5 or 6 of these, and then you say, the guy they're talking to at the moment is Orlando Bloom, of course their reaction is, of course they're not. And then when they confirm that he's Orlando Bloom, it is a bit strange. So yeah, I spent some time with him. He's an interesting character. He loves speed. He's not a racing guy, but he lives his life at speed, and he does his extreme sports. He's currently got a series out around him freestyle climbing, learning how to parachute from high altitudes, doing an underwater dive, holding his breath. So he's a all action hero, right, with a pretty face. So yeah, to have him. But the funniest story I think about Orlando is we were having dinner, and there was one of the Sony executives on the table, and we're just talking. We've had a few drinks, and we're just talking about stuff. And Orlando says, "Well, it was really weird. By the age of, I don't know, he said 26 or whatever. I was involved in 2 of the biggest ever movie franchises, and I was like one of the most Google people in the world when people were measuring how much Google traffic there was, and blah blah blah." And I said, "Yeah, the movie franchise is amazing." Yeah, I said, "I've never seen any of those films." And the Sony guy said, "Bullshit." But genuinely, I've never watched any of the Pirates of the Caribbean or any of Lord of the Rings. Just not my sort of film, right? There's no cars in them for a start.
That's true.
And they're not true to life. So this film is targeted at me. I love films that are based in reality, and of course, then try and research whether they are real or not afterwards. And I love car films. So I must be one of the only human beings on the planet with access to a cinema that hasn't seen some of Orlando Bloom's films, and then he goes to play me. So a weird scenario.
So did he? I'm guessing. So you've met Orlando then? Did he? I know it must be odd because he's acting a role that's like you say, it's not really you. It's more of a corporate type character. But did he talk to you? And I guess they've done all their research and everything.
Yeah. He asked me. He asked me a lot of stuff about the story in advance of him starting to record it. We didn't meet until sort of a third of the way through the recording of the film. He would message me and ask me, what would you say in this situation? What's the right motorsport phrase? How would you deal with this situation? We're ad-libbing a scene. What would what would have been your way of doing it? So yeah, there was lots of backwards and forwards, but in the end, he plays a stereotypical marketing guy, and in some respects, I'm a stereotypical marketing guy, or was, but in other words, I'm not a stereotypical corporate marketing guy, and that's what comes across on screen. So there's of course there's artistic license. I mean, the David Harbour character. And if you haven't seen the film, he's the guy he's the policeman out of Stranger Things, married to Lily Allen. Really interesting guy, very very funny, excellent actor. That character didn't exist. That character is a culmination or a combination of 5 or 6 people. There's a little bit of me in there. On the mentoring side, there's an engineer, a guy called Ricardo de Villa, who unfortunately has passed away during the filming of the film, who was absolutely legendary F1 character, then came into sports cars at the end of his career and really had a massive impact on Jan. Bob Neville, who was the team manager of the Nissan racing team, is a little bit of him in there. We had some psychological coaches and some physical coaches. There's a bit of them. We got driving coaches. There's a bit of them in there. So yeah, it's one of those characters they put in films which is just smash a load of people together, so you don't have to introduce 6 different people through the film that you can put into one character. So in that respect, there's a lot of liberties taken. But one of the nice sort of story arcs which I appreciate is Jan, in a very short space of time in the movie, but over effectively 10 years or more now in his life, he's going from a 19-year-old shy gamer to literally, if you look at his Instagram now, Hollywood. I mean, we used to call him Hollywood back in the day anyway, just as a joke. But now he fits in perfectly. He looks like a Hollywood actor. He looks like a Formula One driver. In fact, he looks better than most Formula One drivers. So this young, shy, lovely, by the way, amazing character in terms of his ethics and his upbringing and everything he believes in. 19-year-old all the way through to where he is now in his 30s. That the film does a good job of that, right? The character's very shy at the beginning and then comes out of himself and is a lot more pushy and progressive at the end of the film. So they've done a good job of that. But the other characters, don't believe the Hollywood version of them.
Oh, that is amazing insight you're giving here, Darren. You've answered actually a lot of my questions I have here, but I'd love to know.
Too much. Apologies for that.
No, it's good. It's good. No, it makes my job a bit easier. I'm very curious to know. You said it was a 10-year process. A very long time for any movie, I guess. But I'd love to know when you were first told it had been fully green lit and all signed off and going ahead. And what you thought about that? There
wasn't a line in the sand. You had COVID in the middle of it, so it was happening. It wasn't happening. There was all sorts of discussions backwards and forwards. It's a Columbia Pictures movie as well as a Sony Pictures movie. So, there's a lot of moving parts here. So I don't think I believed it was happening until they actually started gathering cars, for example. So. Then they sort of committed to it. But yeah, there's all sorts of things in there. There was arguments about should it be about Lucas because he was the first guy. There was people that wanted that to happen. I'm ambivalent really. I know that Jan's story is interesting, but there was backwards and forwards between Nissan, PlayStation, Polyphony, the studio about how that should go. I think they've had 5 script writers at least that I know of. Wow. So the script's adapted a lot. And I don't think I've said this to anyone before. I don't think it's a secret. At one point, Jerry Bruckheimer was making the movie. So now as an executive producer, the guy that's now obviously just finished Maverick, as well as a number of other amazing films that he makes. And he couldn't commit because he was doing the Formula One film. So at one point he was making it. So you got all these changes in the background of personnel in big corporates as well, right? You've got at least 2 cinema studios. You've got Sony corporate, PlayStation. These are all individual companies. They're all under the same umbrella, but they're all individual companies. And Nissan. So you can imagine why it took 10 years. But the good thing is that the script that the movie was based on was as close to reality as any I've seen. And the early ones are absolutely atrocious. So sometimes it is good to wait.
Absolutely.
Delayed gratification is a thing.
Yeah, 100%. I've got last couple of questions here, Darren. I feel like Gran Turismo, this is just my personal feeling on this, has maybe not been as prominent as it could have been in the world of like sim racing and esports. We've had other games sort of take the mantle there. You've mentioned F1 and so on. Why do you think that is? For me, GT has always been the main racing video game. But there are some esports that use Gran Turismo, but it doesn't seem to be as prevalent as other titles.
You've asked me to open a can of worms. You said you've got 2 last-minute questions. I mean, I could talk about that question for an hour.
Really?
Genuinely.
Yeah.
They bought out, if you think, pre-GT7, so between GT6 and GT7, they bought out GT Sport, which was supposed to be their esports title. As we sit here now, the World Series or something, I can't remember the name of it, which is the problem, right? Of Gran Turismo is being held in Amsterdam. They have got the perfect marketing platform. There's a movie coming out the same day that they're holding their World Series, and yet I can't remember what the World Series is called. I think it might be called World Series. The overall problem in the industry is there's too much going on. There's too many racing series. There's too many games. It's absolutely, it's fragmented, right? So there's not one, apart from F1, and the only reason the F1 esports is successful is because of F1. There are a number of things that were wrong with that, and I think you'll see, I don't think it's been announced, but there is big changes coming to F1 esports, right? You should, Dom, you should dig into that, because that could be a breaking story. But there's some really big changes in terms of how it's organised, who organises it, where it's being held, what the process is, what the structure is. Massive changes, which I think are for the best, by the way. But that's the big dog, and it's only the big dog because of Formula One, because they can lean on that audience and whatever. Outside of that, no one's getting any traction. Nobody's getting any coverage. ESL launched their own series, R1.
Yeah.
Massive money invested, all the right teams, all the right drivers. As far as I can tell, great platform in terms of the game. Shouldn't call it a game anymore. But the platform that it's based on, just not getting any views, and that's because everyone's trying to do their own thing.
Yeah.
And that is part of the problem for GT, right? They're a big dog in terms of the number of items they sell. But I would say, so I'm slightly going to disagree with you. It's designed as Kaz would say, a driving simulator. It's designed as a game, right? It's designed as something that is quite casual, but you can ramp up to not being casual. You can be obsessive, and you can, make a career out of it, because people have. So their commercial success for Gran Turismo is not esports. It's about selling more boxes or downloads, as it is now. And I've always had the opinion esports is there predominantly, and the best use of it is, for me, for game makers and publishers, is to promote their game. So the best of the best play the game in a great environment with high stakes, with fantastic backing, and they're great personalities that then create great content that mean that if that breaks even as an individual activity for the business, it's free marketing, right?
Mm.
And
That's it.
if I'm the consumer, if I'm the gamer, I get excited by Gran Turismo or League of Legends
That's
or
it. It's a marketing
whatever
vehicle,
it
isn't it?
is. Yeah, yeah, and I want to be that person. It's like when you go karting at your local pay 20 quid and have 5 laps thing. You think you're Max Verstappen, or maybe you think you're Lando Norris, right? It's the same. So that's the ultimate for me aim of esports, and I think we've sort of lost that in motorsport. I think people are navel gazing like they do in motorsport in general. They're just focused on them. They're focused on their little group of people. And my analogy, which people will say is unfair, I think, is the some people in motorsport. The problem with motorsport is I can either watch esports racing right now. Let's say at the weekend. Let's say Sunday afternoon. I could go on. Probably there's some sort of esports race somewhere in the world that I could watch, or I could watch probably 5 or 6 different race series from around the world. Everything from there's probably an IndyCar race this weekend that I could watch on TV, but there's also a live stream from Brands Hatch of mini racing. Right?
Yeah.
I've raced minis. I've raced a number of things. 24-hour races I've won were live streamed, right?
Yeah.
So I can watch that. So esports racing is not only competing with other esports and other hobbies and other things that I can spend my time on, like going to the cinema and watching the great Gran Turismo movie, but also it's competing for eyeballs against real racing. And with with where Formula One's gone, people want to watch real racing. Look at the numbers of people that attended Silverstone. Look at the numbers of people that are going to spend ridiculous money getting to Vegas to watch that race.
Yeah.
So it's got a challenge. And what esports racing has done is it's taken the success it had during COVID, right? And by the way, that's what that is in the background. That is all the cars from our Legends trophy that we did, the All-Stars series,
Nice.
of all the drivers that we did. So I've got cars from there's Jenson Button's car there. There's Mario Andretti. There's Sebastian Vettel. They all raced in our championship, and that was absolutely fantastic. And by the way, there's not many. The only 2 things I've got there. They're all the cars that I raced with at Nissan, and they're all the cars that in that championship. So it's a nice thing to do. I've never really collected stuff, but that's a lovely thing. It's a great memory. But that the success of COVID for esports racing, it allowed people to rest on their laurels and think that they've made it. Absolutely. They had made it during COVID, and then there was another challenge. And I don't think esports racing, has recognised that they need to adapt. They need to change that. COVID's done. There's a brilliant curve. I'm trying to think of the name of the curve. It's about how technology is seen, and then basically it goes up. There's a massive peak at the beginning, and everyone thinks it's the next big thing. Then it drops off, and there's a moment when people realise that it isn't as great as everyone thinks it is, and then it's a gradual build up back to where the peak it was. But this is going to take years. We had the peak. We end up in what was called the Valley of Disillusionment. We're there. I genuinely think we're there. But now is the time to look at that, realise that there was a peak we're not in at the moment, and adapt and change, and work out how you then build that new slow growth back to where the peaks were before. So that's the problem. I think it's not just GT, in my opinion. Esports racing has got to look at itself. But GT is not designed as an esport business. GT is designed to get downloads and people to buy more cars, and that's the basis of it. And of course, Kaz loves the competition side. That's why he's putting on this massive event. But I would be interested to see the numbers of people. He's got the perfect marketing platform, as I say, with the movie coming out. There's no other F1. There's no F1 this weekend. He's got a perfect opportunity. I would be interested to see the number of people that are watching that online. I don't think it's going to be big numbers that gets people excited about the future of esports racing is Gran Turismo.
I completely agree with what you're saying about a lot of the motor companies and the different companies involved in sim racing. They're all trying to do their own thing. I see it a lot. I get a lot of press releases from different motor brands and sim racing as well. It reminds me a little bit of the fighting game genre in that it's its own sphere. It's sort of insular to other esports. When I think of League of Legends and Counter-Strike and Valorant, there's a bit of crossover there between some of the fans and some of those core esports teams like your Cloud9s and Team Liquids and Optic Gaming and all of that stuff. Whereas sim racing, it does feel insular and everyone's trying to do their own tournament and there's almost too much choice. And you're right, I completely agree. Petrol heads, fans of motor racing, watching things on TV, they're the kind of people that like sim racing, whereas maybe traditional gamers don't always like every single racing game. I think GT, though, is one of the games that did appeal to those general gamers like myself and got those gamers into racing.
General gamers, because it's easy to get into. You know, I had a sim just over here for 2 years with, I had a Seto Corsa and R Factor loaded on it, and I just couldn't. It sounds awful, isn't it? I mean, I'm nearly 50, so you know, I'm a gamer, but I'm not a gamer. You know what I mean? And I couldn't be bothered. Now, if I'd have had GT sat there and I could just jump on and have 3 or 4 laps of the Nürburgring in a GTR and just push a button and off I go, I probably would have used it.
Yeah.
But, you know how complex certainly R Factor 2 is, right? And I'm gonna have to wing it. So casual gamers, you know, I mean, GT's blown Forza out of the water in my opinion over the years. You know, at one point they were sort of, you know, it was Forza or GT. I mean, I don't even know, I can't remember what Forza have done recently, right? So. But I genuinely think that there is an improvement to be had around the way that everybody markets racing games and esports racing. And I would say that, wouldn't I? Because I've done it a few times and we've had reasonable success.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned the big marketing opportunity for Sony. I guess one of the obvious questions I had was, you know, if you're getting a lot of people watching this film, some people might think, oh, I'm going to enter that. But from what I understand, the GT Academy shut down in 2016. I don't know if you know what the story was behind that, or if they felt like, well, 10 years is quite a long time.
I'll give you some facts, and then you can work it out yourself. I left Nissan in 2015.
Right. Okay.
And that was it. That was the fact. That was it. That's all I got.
It's a shame, though. It seems a shame to me.
No, so genuinely, and again, I don't think I've said this. You know, when I left, apparently management that were signing these budgets off didn't call it GT Academy, they called it DC Academy after me, Darren Cox. And therefore, once I'd left, they killed it. They killed it straight away because it was seen as my project. Now, in 2015, Nissan were miles ahead of any other car company in the gaming world because of GT Academy and the knowledge that we'd gained because of GT Academy. And then, just because of politics and egos, they can it. I mean, it's just that's politics in big companies, I'm afraid, and it's really sad. Now, if I was sat certainly at Sony, maybe not Nissan, I don't think Nissan will ever go back to it. I'd absolutely, if I was at PlayStation, revive GT Academy. I mean, I'm surprised. What should be happening at the end of Kaz's presentation, at the end of this World Series, whatever it's called, should be an announcement saying, with our very good friends at Toyota, we're starting GT Academy off again. So when the buzz of the film gets going and, you know, everyone's searching about GT Academy and then bang, GT Academy's back, holy shit. But I am a betting man and I would say that ain't happening.
And that's something I find hard is politics. You get politics in esports as well, and I try and detach myself from that, sit on the fence a bit and do what I guess journalists are sometimes expected to do and try and tell both sides of the story. The politics it's just too much for me as well. But it sounds like there's a lot of that in the racing world because you've got, like you say, those egos, and you have that in esports as well. When you bring racing and esports together, you do get stuff like this. Yeah, that was, you know,
but you know, we managed that. But then you add in a Hollywood movie, it is even more highly charged. So that's why I'm happy to be sat here in my office rather than being in Amsterdam for the events that are going on over there. But you'll see, you know, all the photo calls. Of course, Kaz is in it, Jan's in it, but there's also executives from the Hollywood movie studios who basically have been involved in this project for 18 months. I've had this project for 18 years and am now not involved in it.
So have you not been invited then to things like the premiere?
No, I went to Barcelona for the European Influencer and Press event. I had a Sony Pictures Europe very kindly put on a screening for my friends and family, or a few screenings for my friends and family in London. So no, that sort of stuff. But they don't want to tell my story. Go back to one of your initial questions. They don't want to tell my story. They want to tell the story of PlayStation and Polyphony. So I'm absolutely fine with that. I completely understand the politics. It's absolutely fine by me. I'm just trying to explain it for everyone watching this that things aren't what they seem, and you should never think that they are. So there's always a story behind the story, which is why, as you say, I should write the book, finish the book.
100%. Yeah, I'd love to read that. Darren, it's been absolutely fantastic, this level of insight you've provided, and I know, with the politics, and they haven't maybe told your story in the way that they could have done or should have done. At the end of it looks like we've got an amazing film. I haven't seen the film yet, but judging from the trailer and the whole story, you've made a real impact on racing and esports. So yeah, I want to thank you for that personally, from like a gamer perspective as well. You've done a hell of a lot, so thank you. And is there anything else you'd like to add, Darren? I feel like we could talk a lot.
I appreciate your words. I mean, there's an interesting line at the end of the film that said something like GT Academy changed the world of motorsport forever. I'll take that as my epitaph. And I don't know if I've mentioned it. I've obviously spoken to a number of people, so I forget who I say this to, but I think my conclusion absolutely is Gran Turismo, amazing film, but the reality was better. So I'd say go and see it. If you're half interested in gaming or racing, go and see it. Suspend reality for 2 hours, enjoy it. Know that the gaming now and esports to a certain extent is can't be ignored. Look how many gaming movies we've had in the last 2 or 3 years, and also one of my favorite pieces of TV from last year, The Last of Us, I thought was absolutely astonishing in terms of an adaptation. So we should celebrate that. We shouldn't pick holes in the fact that the story isn't quite there. We should absolutely celebrate, for me as a car and gaming guy, the fact that they've made a Hollywood movie about two of my passions. I think is brilliant, and I encourage everyone to go and see it, and but also do a bit of research in the background. It's great that you've listened to this, but also do a bit of research in the background about the real story behind it, because it's equally, if not more, fascinating.
Fantastic, Darren. Thanks so much. All the best with everything you're doing, and I hope to hear from you again in the future. But real eye-opening stuff, and thanks very much for your time.
Cheers, Dom.